Although most people have never heard of him outside academia, Arthur Schopenhauer developed one of the most brutally honest theories about solitude that has ever existed. His writings on human nature contain an observation that still troubles us today. The more someone possesses within themselves, the less they need from the external world. Instead of fighting against our need for isolation as if it were a defect to be cured with therapy or forced socialization, the old German philosopher suggested that we accept this as the natural destiny of certain minds. You're at a party right now. Loud music blasting eardrums, people talking at the same time creating incomprehensible cacophony, and all you can think about obsessively is when you'll be able to leave, go back to your quiet room, pick up that book on page 53. You force a smile that your facial muscles no longer believe in. You fake interest with increasingly unconvincing performance. But inside there's a voice that won't stop screaming, "Get me out of here, for the love of whatever God still exists." Always the same conversations going in circles without arriving anywhere relevant. Always pretending you care deeply about who won Big Brother or the latest manufactured Twitter drama. Always going home completely destroyed because you performed too much, lied too much about who you really are. What Schopenhauer would poetically call the fortune of exceptional spirits is actually a life sentence without possibility of parole, and nobody honestly warns you that it hurts exactly like this, that it cuts with this precision, before eventually, maybe, turning into freedom. Everyone around you seems to surf through these interactions naturally. They talk about reality shows, about which influencer cheated on whom. The noise blends into a frequency that your brain refuses to process as relevant information. When they ask why you're quiet, you make up any excuse. The truth is too simple to say. There's nothing here worth the caloric expenditure of moving your jaw. This awakening doesn't come with a scheduled date. Simply one day you realize you can no longer not see. Like taking off sunglasses on a blazing sunny day, this brutal clarity that should liberate becomes another kind of prison. You can no longer return to the comfortable blindness where everyone else still lives. Carl Jung dedicated decades to what he called individuation, the psychological process of separating who you really are from the expectations placed on you since childhood. The Swiss psychiatrist was honest about the price. It's lonely, misunderstood, painful in ways nobody warns you about beforehand. Most people around are living in copy-paste mode of other people's lives, and they definitely don't want you showing them that it's possible to live differently. The solitude you experience has nothing to do with geography or numbers. You can be surrounded by family at Christmas and feel isolation so absolute, it feels like you're watching rituals of an alien civilization through bulletproof glass. Nobody seems to inhabit the same inner planet as you. They skate on the frozen crust while you swim beneath it, where the water is dark and the pressure crushes lungs. There's a passage from Schopenhauer that haunts me to this day. He wrote that solitude is the inevitable destiny of exceptional spirits, not as flattery or empty praise, but as precise medical diagnosis. Minds that operate at a certain depth simply don't find compatible frequency in the average of society. Your mind processes information in 7 simultaneous and parallel layers, while someone tells a completely mundane story at Friday lunch. You hear the literal words being said, detect the emotional subtext pulsing beneath the superficial narrative. Notice glaring contradictions between what the person says and how their body moves. Map in real time the psychological defenses being activated. Identify behavioral patterns that repeat themselves. Question unspoken premises that structure the story. Compare all of this with similar historical contexts you've already read about. It's like running industrial software for analyzing complex data on a computer that everyone else around uses exclusively to watch dog memes and stalk exes on social media. When you make the mistake of trying to share 1 or 2 of these layers of analysis, when you try to explain the fascinating connections your mind automatically mapped, people look at you as if you had deliberately, maliciously complicated something that was perfectly simple and digestible. As if you were the problematic one for not accepting the shallow version as sufficient. So you learn fast, you learn through pain, you keep absolutely everything inside, process alone, chew alone, swallow alone. And the abyss between you and others only increases millimeter by millimeter, day after day. What Jung technically called in his writings persona, this social mask that every human being develops to navigate society, becomes something much heavier and more suffocating for you. It's not a light carnival mask, but a complete astronaut suit that you consciously wear 14, 16 hours a day, every day, without breaks or weekends. Everyone wears some version of a social mask, obviously. It's impossible to live in society without some degree of filter and performance. But yours physically hurts at the pressure points. Yours creaks when you move. Yours cuts off oxygen circulation to the brain. You smile weakly in conversations that bore you to the marrow of your bones. Mechanically nod your head, agreeing with opinions you consider not just shallow, but actively and dangerously limited. When you slip for a second, when you forget to maintain total control and show yourself fully without all the safety filters activated, people visibly, physically recoil. Literally take a complete step backward, creating safety distance. They immediately label you as too intense for a Sunday afternoon, or too complicated for something that should be simple. You learn this lesson through repeated social rejection until it becomes reflex. Carefully dose each word, calibrate each facial expression, reveal only tiny and harmless crumbs of real authenticity. This constant and exhausting theater drains your vital energy, your strength to keep existing, more than any 12-hour manual labor job could ever drain. And there are days when you forget the costume at home. You talk about topics that actually matter. You see the immediate discomfort crystallize in the air like ice. People exchange glances. They change the subject as if you had blasphemed. Or worse, they look at you with polite pity, silently diagnosing that you need professional help. Irony, most don't know the difference between antisocial and asocial, but that's okay. They also confuse correlation with causation. Being misunderstood works like surgery without anesthesia. You talk about existential emptiness. They recommend CrossFit. You express legitimate philosophical questioning. They diagnose depression to be medicated. You analyze the futility of certain norms. They call you antisocial and hope you'll get better. They judge your silence as a factory defect, your solitude as a symptom, your depth as a bug that needs an update patch. But this misunderstanding reveals more about the limitation of the receivers than about the failure of the transmitted signal. Schopenhauer, with all his well-documented and characteristic bitterness, developed over decades a genuinely disturbing theory about the nature of reality. The entire world as a manifestation of a blind, irrational will, without conscious purpose or intelligent direction, pushing absolutely everyone into a frenzied and desperate race with no real finish line or worthwhile prize. The overwhelming majority of people are completely identified, fused with this will without even minimally realizing they're being piloted like a drone by remote control. They live in the most complete automatic mode. They want things because they were meticulously programmed since the cradle to want exactly these things. They consume products because they were repeatedly promised that consumption cures emptiness and brings permanent happiness. They fiercely compete in a game whose real and underlying rules absolutely nobody has read carefully, but everyone follows religiously, as if they were divine commandments carved in stone. You see this programming running in real time. People chasing after promotions that don't satisfy, likes that don't fulfill, status that doesn't complete, approval that doesn't heal. All trapped on the hamster wheel, running faster without leaving the spot. When you gently point this out, they look at you as if you suggested stopping breathing, as if you were the crazy one for not finding this organized collective madness normal. This perception brings clarity that cuts both ways. You understand the game, but can no longer play with innocence. You become a permanent spectator, and spectators always watch alone. The process that Jung spent decades unraveling, individuation, becoming who you really are, doesn't come with a group instruction manual. Nobody descends into your personal abyss for you. You confront your internal shadows alone, question every inherited truth alone, abandon certainties that society offers as collective anesthetic. It's lonely, but not as punishment, as a protected laboratory where the alchemy happens of transforming fear into courage, fragmentation into wholeness. Most people flee this confrontation their entire lives. They fill every second with podcasts, series, endless scrolling. Because being truly alone in absolute silence forces you to look inside, and inside lives a dragon that most prefer never to wake. We live obsessed with noise, productivity without pause, permanent exposure. Silence has become a social offense. But old Schopenhauer had already realized something our generation has completely forgotten. Silence is not emptiness to be filled, but concentrated presence. wisdom that doesn't need a stage or audience. You don't need to narrate your life to prove it exists. You don't need to turn every moment into digestible content for the algorithm. Your silence is a choice. And in it you hear things that constant noise massacres. Your genuine inner voice, uncontaminated intuitions, authentic needs. Silence returns access to yourself. There's a hole inside that no streaming fills, no external achievement permanently covers. Like those black holes that astrophysicists study. The more you throw matter into it, the bigger it gets. You've already tried everything the happiness industry sells. Relationships that promised completeness, promotions that would bring eternal satisfaction, transformative trips in 6 installments. Nothing sticks. The euphoria passes, the novelty ages, and there it is again. Bigger, hungrier. Schopenhauer explained this with surgical precision. We are creatures of insatiable desire by factory design. We conquer something. Desire has already jumped to the next storefront. Between the anxiety of wanting and the boredom of having achieved, we oscillate perpetually without ever finding real peace, always seeking the next fix that promises to be different, but delivers the same existential hangover. Most accept this cycle as if it were a law of physics. They keep trying to plug the existential hole with more external things. The more they try, the more the hole grows. You already know the obvious truth nobody wants to accept. Nothing coming from outside permanently fills what's missing inside. This hole you carry isn't necessarily psychiatric pathology. It's your entire soul rejecting the basic package that society offers. An internal calling to a life that doesn't fit within the surface of conventions. It hurts, but it points direction. Inward, downward, to the depths. Jung showed us with uncomfortable clarity something that continues to frighten people to this day. Absolutely all of us, without a single exception, have a substantial psychological shadow. These are all those aspects of personality that were systematically repressed since childhood, by well-intentioned or controlling family. Characteristics that were actively rejected by hostile social environment. Parts of ourselves that we hide under layers and more layers of deep and paralyzing shame. Impulses that entire society judges completely unacceptable and punishable. Intense emotions that you were taught since childhood to never, ever demonstrate under penalty of total rejection and abandonment. Rage accumulated and swallowed for decades that ferments inside. Corrosive envy that you vehemently deny but corrodes inside like acid. Subtle and sophisticated manipulation that you use instrumentally but categorically pretend not to see working. The overwhelming majority of people project the entire shadow onto others throughout their whole lives. They obsessively see in noisy neighbors, in envious colleagues, in corrupt politicians, in narcissistic ex-spouses all the particular and monstrous demons that they terminally refuse to recognize and accept in their own mirror fogged by morning shower steam. But you, with your incurable introspective nature, this self-destructive capacity to look inward without cowardly looking away, you are inevitably, inexorably dragged to the frontal and unanesthetized encounter with your own personal shadow. And when this encounter finally truly happens, when you look straight ahead without blinking at all the accumulated internal darkness, without fleeing terrified, without conveniently rationalizing, without creating elaborate and convincing excuses for yourself, you literally ground. The floor disappears from under your feet. You see with brutal and crystalline clarity your real, concrete, measurable capacity for genuinely destructive anger that could deeply hurt people you swear you love. You see primitive selfish impulses that place your personal comfort far above any ethics you publicly declare to follow. You see frightening potential for gratuitous cruelty that exists latent in you exactly as much as it exists in any clinically diagnosed psychopath. You see all the small daily and apparently innocent lies you systematically tell yourself just to be able to sleep peacefully at night without paralyzing remorse. And you can't unsee once you've seen clearly. Impossible to erase from memory. But there's beauty in this horror. Integrating the shadow instead of repressing it makes you whole for the first time. It frees you from pretending to be only light. And paradoxically, when you accept dark aspects, they lose power over you. Recognized anger can be channeled. Named fear can be confronted. Integrated darkness becomes fuel, not self-destruction. The more authentic you gradually become over months and years, the more people visibly move away from your social orbit. And you notice this happening in small but unmistakable details. Invitations to events that mysteriously stop coming without any explanation offered. Messages you send that remain eternally suspended in digital vacuum without response or view notification. Glances that automatically look away with suspicious haste when you physically enter the room or environment. Radical authenticity works in practice as an ultra-sensitive metal detector that only beeps loudly and insistently for falseness and performance, and absolutely nobody genuinely likes discovering in a public and embarrassing way that they're made inside of cheap plastic instead of real substance. When you completely stop performing your life, when you remove all filters and all emotional Photoshop, you automatically expose by pure geometric contrast the elaborate and constant performance of all other people around you. Your authentic and unedited existence becomes a giant accusing mirror that they definitely didn't ask to see, but absolutely can't avoid when they're near you. What Schopenhauer observed about ordinary people makes sense here. They desperately seek entertainment outside because they can't stand their own internal company. They need constant external stimulation, permanent validation from others, noise to drown out the inner silence that terrifies them. People with developed depth seek sources of meaning within. When you make this migration, you automatically separate from those who still depend on external validation to feel real. You will lose friendships. They'll call you changed. And there's truth in that. You changed, but not out of arrogance or superiority, simply because you can no longer sustain connections based on mutual pretense, the price of authenticity. But also the reward. Each superficiality that leaves opens space for real connection. I know it sounds like cheap self-help, but math doesn't lie. If you have X energy and spend 80% of it pretending, only 20% remains to be real. If you're enjoying this content, check out in the first comment our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes. There's a voice inside that only you hear, a calling that doesn't make sense to anyone else, what Jung called the self, the center that guides you to wholeness. It's not ego worried about survival. It's something deeper, older than social conditioning. Most never hear it because they live with constant external noise drowning out the delicate frequency of the inner voice. They live borrowed lives, careers that bring status but zero meaning, relationships correct on paper but hollow in the heart. You hear it, and that complicates everything. Responding requires disappointing expectations, choosing a misunderstood path, the courage to walk alone while everyone pulls you toward the herd. Your isolation may be the universe creating silent space for you to finally hear what your soul has been asking for years. Schopenhauer, despite all his pessimism, recognized compassion as the only genuine virtue. Not sentimentalism, but visceral recognition that everyone shares the same fundamental suffering. The difference, most systematically deny it, build elaborate psychological walls to not feel the naked truth of existence. Your capacity to suffer deeply isn't just a burden, it's a portal to empathy that shallow people never reach. When you know your own pain intimately, you develop the capacity to recognize others' pain without trying to hastily fix it. Sometimes a person just needs to be seen in their pain. True alchemy, transforming wound into wisdom, using sensitivity as a bridge to deeper understanding. The scars you carry aren't weaknesses. They're credentials of authenticity that no diploma provides. Evidence that you survived what should have destroyed you. The fight against your own nature is the real source of suffering. What Jung hammered home, what you resist, persists and strengthens. The more you fight against who you are, the more this truth haunts you. Culture says you should be more social, lighter, more normal. You internalized these voices, believed something was wrong. But the liberating truth, you don't need fixing. You're not broken. Introspective nature isn't a defect, it's a distinctive characteristic. The need for solitude isn't pathology, but a requirement for healthy functioning. When you embrace this, stop resisting, something settles. The fight ceases. Peace emerges. It's not about fixing, but about radical acceptance, integration, reuniting fragments into conscious wholeness, Jung's central concept. It begins with accepting who you are now. When you stop fighting against your nature and work with it, everything changes. Schopenhauer had clarity. Happiness depends on what you are internally, not on what you have or how you're seen. Most invert the equation. They chase possessions, status, approval, and discover too late that external achievements never fill internal voids. Your inner life is vast, a universe that most never explore because they're busy pursuing external validation. While others depend on outside stimulation, you possess an inexhaustible internal source, capacity for reflection, imagination, deep processing, real wealth that nobody confiscates. Chosen solitude doesn't impoverish. It reveals wealth that was always there. Without constant distractions, you access accumulated inner treasure. Schopenhauer spent hours immersed in thoughts. People found it sad. He knew he possessed an inner world so rich that superficial company represented impoverishment. Jung and Schopenhauer shared something: misunderstanding in their times. They lived isolated. Jung expelled from Freud's circle. Schopenhauer years without recognition, empty classes. They didn't give up. They continued the solitary journey. Now their legacies have transformed human understanding of consciousness, not despite solitude, but through it. Solitary space allowed truly original ideas, living authentically, existing without masks, refusing to betray your nature. This transforms the world around you. When you individuate, you give permission for others to do the same. You become a living example that another way is possible. Depth matters. Silence means something. Solitude has purpose. They're not defects, but characteristics of a journey that most don't have the courage for. Evidence that you chose the more difficult, but infinitely more truthful path. Stop trying to fit where you don't belong. You spent years forcing meaningless connections, trying to like conversations that bored your soul, laughing at unfunny jokes, getting excited about events that drained you. This exhausted you. You spent vital energy trying to be who you're not. The challenge Jung left: become who we really are. Not who parents want or who society expects, but who we are in essence. And what Schopenhauer taught: solitude isn't punishment, but the destiny of those who refuse to live only on the surface. Invitations to freedom. Freedom to stop pretending, drop the heavy mask, live from the true center. Your solitude isn't solitude. It's inner sovereignty. Choice of quality over quantity. Your silence isn't weakness. It's wise refusal of empty conversation. Your misunderstanding isn't rejection. It's natural selection. People who don't understand you operate on a different frequency. That's okay. Final invitation. Fully embrace your nature. Accept that you're different. Recognize that difference isn't defect. Honor your need for solitude as sacred space. Value silence as wisdom. Because the only unforgivable betrayal is betraying yourself. Selling your soul for approval that never comes. Abandoning who you are to please a world that will never understand your depth. Walk alone if necessary. Stay silent when others make noise. Be misunderstood by those who live on the surface. You're not here to fit in. You're here to become who you really are. A solitary process, but the most important journey that exists. And if this search for depth resonates with you, then maybe this channel is your place. A place where depth isn't a defect, where silence doesn't need to justify itself, where solitude can be sovereignty. If you want to support this work more closely, consider joining the Members Club for exclusive content. Until the next video.